So a new Quinnipiac poll released Monday shows President Trump has again hit his lowest approval rating of his presidency, 33%. He hit that number back all the way on August 2nd, 2017. That's an 11% drop, actually, from his December approval number rating of 44%.
And some new Vox polls also show some trouble for Trump. 63% of Americans believing he's to blame for the insurrection and 51% supporting impeachment. Back with us, our owner of JC Strategies, Democratic strategist Jennifer Holdsworth-Karp, and Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Great to see you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Rachel, let me start with you. Just in general, because there seems to be this seismic divide within the Republican Party. Just saw some reporting like 10 to 20 Republicans in the House may vote for impeachment. I think that number is probably like in the single digits within the Senate. But at the end of the day, buried within that is that Trump still has a 73% approval rating within the Republican Party. How do you think that these dynamics are going to play themselves out in the future within the party in the circumstances after the Capitol riots?
Well, I think how our leaders handle this is going to tell us a lot because, a lot of this has been about Trump and some of the, focus should rightly be on him. But at the end of the day, we need to seek to understand what drove all those people to spend their own money and go to the Capitol, and the majority of which did not breach the Capitol, right, which was a terrible thing that should never have happened. But those people are still Americans, and their concerns are not going away. And for whatever reason, we need to understand why they felt so disenfranchised and that the only people they could trust in the entire country were Lin Wood and QAnon. That speaks to a real serious dysfunction in our politics. And to be honest, I really think it's a huge failure of the Republican leadership, generally speaking, across the party, that we even got to this point. Like no senator or House member should have ever gotten to the point where they felt their only two choices were either to deny the results of an election or basically flip the bird to their voters on what was their, number one issue. That is a failure, a huge failure of Republican leadership. Our politics is catharsis. They should have addressed this question on the minds of a lot of voters in any number of ways, and they could have done it. They chose not to. They chose to ignore it, dismiss it, and downplay it. And here we are. So this has got to be a reckoning for Republicans that goes far beyond Donald Trump. But I think it's a mistake if they simply say this is just about Trump, and now that Trump is gone, these people are going because they're not.
That's a good point.
What do you think of that, Jen?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to completely disagree with my fine colleague here. I think this is appealing to the lowest common denominator. The inmates are running the asylum. And if there's been a failure of the Republican leadership, it is to shut down the massive conspiracy theory that has become the Republican Party. I think that we can have honest debates until we're blue in the face about economic and financial policy. We can have debates until we're blue in the face about the First Amendment and individual rights. But when you are held hostage in the U.S. Capitol by a mental health crisis come to life, that is not something that can be cured by our politics. That is not a disagreement of politics, right? So I think that there is a serious problem in the Republican Party that needs to be addressed by somebody brave. It doesn't need to be catered to.
So I'm not sure that I hear you guys saying really different things, Jen. So just dig into that a little bit more. When you say it can't be addressed by politics, what can it be addressed by?
Right. We know that politics is full of acrimony. We've seen it on this show with various people that have come on, right? We see it on the cable news networks. When you think of politics, you think of talking heads, you think of gamemanship, something we were talking about in the last segment. Now, I think that there's a variety of policies that we can talk about, but I got to tell you, I didn't see a whole lot of economic anxiety when people were storming the Capitol. I saw a lot of pictures of private jets of real estate executives flying in to storm the Capitol, right? I saw a number of former veterans storming the Capitol, right? So yes, I think there is a segment of society that we need to focus on in terms of over the last 20 years, they have been absolutely hammered in terms of economics in this country for a variety of reasons. And I think Wall Street has a lot to do with it, right? But I don't think Wall Street had anything to do with what happened at the Capitol last week. And I think if we give Republicans a pass by saying, hey, they had to listen to those people because they were Americans. Sure, they were Americans, but they're also criminals and domestic terrorists, and we absolutely will not cater to them under any circumstances.
Well, Rachel, let's talk about this. Yeah, this is one thing, Rachel, which is where I want to get you in on here, which is that I feel like we have no choice but to address it through politics, because it seems to me that these, structural inequities, the lack of meaning within people's lives, yes, it's not economics is part of the story. It's not the entire story. There's also cultural grievance and all that play a role here. What do you think, Rachel, just in terms of responding to that point?
So I want to be very clear about one thing, that there's a big distinction between the criminals that stormed the Capitol, who should be punished under full measure of law, and the thousands of people that just came because they felt frustrated. They felt frustrated with their politicians. They didn't feel represented. There is a clear distinction between those two groups. Now, in terms of our politics, this is what our politics is for, is to mete out these national questions, to provide a level of catharsis where people feel seen and their voices feel heard. This is what our politics is for. And I actually think it's a great disaster and failure of politics when you have people that don't feel that. And again, I speak a lot about the failures of Republican leadership on this show. This is one of them. When you shut down the chambers, when you shut down debate on the Senate floor, when you don't allow people to be heard on any question, not just on the election, right? I'm talking any question at all. You can't even have a vote on $2,000 checks by itself. You are disenfranchising people, and you are causing tension to build up in the population where we have a relatively combative political environment for a reason. So people's concerns are expressed, so they don't do things like, create mobs and storm, the United States Capitol or any Capitol.
Yeah. Jen, last question to you. What is your view of how you can come to a place where millions of people believe in utter delusion, right? And some small subset willing to risk their lives for that utter delusion? What are the factors that lead us to that, insane place?
There's a reckoning underway with what we all affectionately refer to as big tech. Right. And I think that they have played an outsized role in what has happened in this country. There are different prescriptions for how to handle that from the left and the right. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. There's nothing that we're ever going to be able to do to put the internet back in the box. There are a large number of people across this country who have grievances, some legitimate, some not, who find like-minded people in large quantities that they wouldn't have been connected to before. Right. So I think that big tech, it needs to be dealt with legislatively. There's some people who want to see the free market take care of itself, which is what's been happening over the last few days and weeks. There's other people who want to see it legislatively dealt with. I'm in that camp. For a long time, I think that they've been completely out of control. Now, that also happens to be only one part of the equation. I think that we need to seriously penalize legislators who participate in that type of disinformation. And that's on both sides of the aisle. I am not exclusively blaming far-right Republicans for some of the vitriol. I think that it absolutely exists on both sides of the aisle. It's one of the reasons that, and I know it gets made fun of a lot, but I really liked Joe Biden's restoring America's soul sort of ethos, and I think he's still harping on it. There was a theme announced for the inauguration, and a lot of it was about unity. But it was about unity in a way that's really, I think, going to help, as opposed to what the Republicans are calling for now, which is, forget about storming the Capitol. Let's just come together and not impeach the president. I think that there has to be honest people on both sides of the aisle that come together to try to stop some of this disinformation that is just completely free-flowing right now.
Yeah. Guys, there's a lot to sort through that I'm sure we're going to continue to talk about in the coming days and weeks. Appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, a lead organizer of all the things that happened on January 6th claims that 2 Arizona congressmen were intimately involved in planning those events. Ryan Grimm is going to tell us more about those stunning allegations and rising returns.